Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar. We take just a sec here and let folks trickle in. Looks like there we go, got some more people coming in. That's great. Very, very good. So we got about an hour scheduled here. We'll probably get done with the content part of this in, I don't know, 45 minutes or so, and then maybe have some time for Q&A at the end. But we'll see how it goes. All right, we'll start off by why don't we do some quick introductions, and then we'll maybe do some housekeeping rules, and then just go ahead and jump right in. So I'll start. My name is Jason Slone. I'm one of the college funding experts here at College Aid Pro. A little bit about my background. I've been in higher education for a long time. Became a professor in 2002. And so I still teach. I'm still a professor, still teach a couple classes at Georgia Southern University outside Savannah, Georgia, where I live. I was a dean for 7 of those years at two different universities. So I always joke that I'm the former dean that spills the beans for parents on how all this stuff works. And I've been a financial advisor since 2008. And starting about 2019 or 20, I focused exclusively on college planning. So I've been doing this for 5 years or so. And honestly, I got into college financial planning for selfish reasons because, like you, I'm a parent. I have 3 kids. I have two in college right now. One's a senior, one's a sophomore, and also have a ninth grader in high school. So I feel your pain, parents. I've been in your shoes. It's stressful. It's exciting, but it's stressful as well. So anyway, very excited to talk with you tonight. Happy to be College Aid Pro. Fantastic company, doing some great work with families. So, and then my teammate here is Kevin Murphy. Murphy, you want to tell him about your background? Murphy's awesome.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. But yeah, no, I too got into this from financial services. I got into college financial aid around 2018. I am one of the financial aid experts here at CAP, and I'm not in Savannah, Georgia, where Jason always brags about how warm it is or how lovely the weather is. But
Hey, I had to put a hoodie on today. It was a little chilly.
that's like the third time this week, I think, because you told me that before this week. So I think Savannah's got a cold front, but. Yeah, it's like 20 degrees here in New Jersey where I'm at. So I think it's a whole different ballgame in terms of temperature. But yeah, I'm in central New Jersey by the shore in a town called West Long Branch. But yeah, no, again, we're really excited to talk through this stuff with you guys tonight, and I'll kick it back over to you, Jason.
All right, sounds good. So, yeah, Murphy's absolutely fantastic. One of our best friends.
So are you.
Uh,
Everyone, you're in really good hands. Between the two
yeah,
of us, we've worked with thousands of families one on one. We've been through this so many times that I don't think there's a situation, a question, or a circumstance that could stump us. But
speaking of that, that's a great segue. So, a couple of housekeeping rules. Tonight, we're going to give you a high-level overview of some financial aid stuff that's going to be super helpful for you. But we'd like to know, what grade, what class are your students in? Are they juniors in high school, so they're class of 27? Drop in the chat what year your students are. We'd love to know. You have sophomores, you have juniors, you have ninth graders. Looks like we got mostly juniors in here. If you have more than one kid, that's okay too. Let us know both. We do have a couple seniors, it looks like there. Okay, good. Oh yeah, I got 3 kids. Mike, yep, I feel your pain. I have 3. That's why I'm broke. Um, yeah, 20, okay, very good. Mostly juniors, but we got some throughout high school. Okay, good. So this will be helpful for juniors. Man, it is go time for you, believe it or not. Like it is time to get going with
three
all this
weeks.
stuff. But yeah, but for sophomores and ninth graders, this is going to be super helpful as well. As you'll see, sophomores, this is actually go time for you as well. Believe it or not, you'll see why tonight. So, okay, thank you for that. Now, the other thing is we're going to give you a high level view, as I said, over financial aid basic stuff that's really important to know to get some clarity on this whole crazy system now. College is very different now than it was when I went to college. It is it's not only more costly than ever, which I'm sure you know, but it's more confusing and complicated than ever as well. So hopefully give you some clarity tonight and all this stuff. But if you have questions, again, we're going to keep it high level, but if you have some questions, got a couple of options for getting your questions answered. Tonight, you can drop questions in the Q&A. Okay, you've already put something in the chat. Now we're going to shift gears. And if you have questions for us, put them in the Q&A. We'll keep track of that throughout. Whoever's not talking, the other person will keep track of the Q&A and try to answer some questions for you. Now, we might not be able to give you good answers to questions because a lot of financial aid stuff is complicated and we need more information, or there's, et cetera, et cetera. So the other way to get your questions answered is we're going to offer you the opportunity to meet with us one-on-one, 15 minutes or so on a free consultation, just kind of get a sense of your situation and give you some advice on next steps. And also, if you're interested in working with us, engaging us for help with all of this, which a lot of parents do, we'd be happy to talk with you about our services, what they cost, what you get, different levels of support and all that kind of stuff in that consultation as well. So if you're interested, after tonight's over, you're thinking, my gosh, I really need some help with all this stuff. We're here to help you. You can book a consultation with us and be happy to chat with you about it. So,
Don't
okay.
hold back on the questions. We'll do our best. We're going to answer everything we possibly can answer. So feel free to go to town. But
Yeah, stump the chump. That's the
yeah,
goal, right? So, okay, let's go ahead and jump right in. So, if you don't know, I assume you do, but in case you don't, College Aid Pro, our mission here at the company is we're trying to end the student debt crisis by empowering families to shop smarter for college. As I said earlier, this whole college planning thing has changed. It's very different now than it used to be when probably all of you went to college. It's extremely expensive now, especially have multiple kids. You could be looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's very confusing and complicated, as you're going to see. And so, too many families, in our opinion, end up taking out tons of loan and piling, burying their kids in debt or burying themselves in debt or robbing their retirement savings just to pay for college. And we're trying to avoid that, help families avoid that. So, that's what we do every day. And part of that mission is to educate parents like we're doing in tonight's webinar. So, why don't we jump right in now to some basics? All right, some financial aid basics. So, in the space of college planning, you'll hear the term financial aid a lot. So, what is financial aid? Well, there's actually there's different kinds of financial aid, and it's really, really important for you to understand the different types or kinds of financial aid. Okay, so this is important for how much it's going to cost. Okay. What we call gift aid in the business, gift aid is a discount off the sticker price. We call it the sticker price. That's the total cost of attendance. You'll often see that jargon COA, cost of attendance. We call that the sticker price because, as you're going to see, a lot of colleges have a advertised cost, but they give you financial aid and bring the cost down. It's like a coupon, if you want to think about it like that. Right? It's Christmas season. My mom loves Kohl's. She's always cutting coupons at Kohl's. Those jeans are not really going to cost you $60 because she's got a coupon. It's actually going to cost her 40. Very similar kind of thing with colleges. There's a sticker price, but gift aid is a discount off of that sticker price. Now, the other kind of financial aid is self-help aid. And the self-help aid helps you pay the bill, but it's not a discount off the price. Okay, so let's explain. Now, when it comes to gift aid, the two green boxes there, these are both free money. That's why it's called gift aid. It's financial aid that's a gift of money to you. So it's a gift aid. It's free money. You don't have to pay it back. So it brings the cost of college down. There's two types of gift aid. Number one is need-based grants. So if you see the word grant, that means that's based on your financial need, your financial profile. And so as we're going to show you tonight, you're going to have to apply for financial aid, and they're going to ask you to fill out these application forms. One's called the FAFSA, in which you report your income and your assets and how much you make, how much you know, that kind of stuff. They look at that and go, okay, this family has some need, some financial need. We'll give you grants to meet that need. The other kind of gift aid, again, free money, don't have to pay it back, brings the cost of college down, is scholarships. You'll often hear this called merit-based aid or merit-based scholarships. And it's called merit-based because it's based on your students' merit, your students' talents, independent of financial need. Okay. And so that's grades, that is test scores, the ability to throw a football or play the bagpipes or whatever. You can get a scholarship based on your kids' talents. Okay. Now, when it comes to self-help aid, as I said earlier, this is not free money. It doesn't bring the cost of college down. It helps you pay the bill, but it doesn't bring the cost down. There's two types of self-help aid. Number one is work study. That is exactly what it sounds like. It is a job that your kid can get on campus. So if you qualify for work study, they're going to say, "Yep, you can work and earn $1,500 a year or $2,500 a year, something like that, to help pay for college." And then they'll offer your kid a job, in the library or the cafeteria or something like that. So your kid goes to work 10 hours a week and gets a paycheck. So again, it helps to pay for college, but it doesn't bring the cost down. Your kid's working for it. And then the other kind of self-help aid, of course, is loans. Right now, we're not anti-loan. at College Aid Pro, it's a reality for many families these days, but we're anti-bad loan and we're anti-too much loan. All right. So the goal is to try to get as much gift aid as possible to get the cost down as much as you can get it down. So you minimize the amount of loans you have to use. Okay. So loans, of course, not free money, helps you pay the bill, but it actually increases the cost of college, often substantially. It's one of the silent killers, really, when it comes to paying for college. Because not only is college expensive by itself, but if you use loans to pay for it, you're making it even more expensive. Okay. And for a lot of parents who have kids going to college at this stage of life, ask me how I know, you're probably thinking, wow, I got retirement right around the corner as well. I got to retire, and then I want to retire in 10 years or whatever that number is for you. And the more spend on college, and if you take out loans, that really could impact, your ability to retire on time, or how much you have for retirement and so forth. So the goal is to try to minimize the amount of loan damage you have. So now let's dive in a little bit to this need-based aid part of the equation. So one of the first things you'll want to know is, are you going to be eligible for need-based aid? Okay. And I'm going to tell you the formula and give you the math, but the easiest way to understand this is to make sure you use MyCAP. You get a free MyCAP account. Every parent gets a free MyCAP account. And Murph, I don't know if you dropped in the chat, but we'll put a link in the chat for to set up a free MyCap account. If you don't have one, that's one of the first things you want to do, is to go out and set up a free MyCap account, because MyCap is going to calculate all of this for you. Okay. But let's get into the math a little bit on how it actually works. So when calculating whether you're eligible for need-based aid, the colleges basically have a formula they follow, and it's determined by the income and the assets you report on the financial aid applications. Which there's basically two. One is called the FAFSA. That's every college is going to require the FAFSA. That stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And then there's several hundred schools that use a private application form called the CSS profile. Okay. And based on your income and the assets that you report on those application forms, okay, they're going to generate a number for your family called the Student Aid Index. That's the orange box there in the middle. Okay. And that's a ballpark of what they think you can afford per year. Okay. Based on your income and your assets, how much you make and how much you own. So then the formula they use to determine need-based aid is the cost of attendance, again, what we call the sticker price, minus your student aid index is how much need you qualify for. So let's say a school costs $90,000. Yeah, there are a lot of schools that cost $90,000 now. Um, and your student aid index comes back at, say, $50,000 based on how much you make as income and how much you own in, real estate or investments or whatever. So you have a demonstrative need of $40,000. Okay. Now, part two of this, which again is where MyCap is going to come in very handy for you, is not all colleges will meet 100% of that need with grants. They might meet need with 60% of the need with grants, or 50% of the need with grants. So if you have $40,000 of need, they'll give you 25,000. You get $40,000 need. They might give you 20,000 in grants, but the other 20,000 they'll offer you a loan, self-help aid. So here's what gets super complicated. Again, MyCap will help you with this because it calculates it for you on a school by school basis. But if the school costs 90 and your SAI is 50, you qualify for 40K in need, you want to know, will that school meet 100% of our need or only a partial bit of that needs? Okay. So you need to know all this to be able then to calculate um, how much aid you're going to get, and therefore what's the true net cost of the college. So here's one, just an example to see, so you can see this in action. So we just took a case from the state of Washington. You're all from all over the country, but we took a public Washington university. In this case, the family lives in the state of Washington, so you get in-state tuition. By the way, pro tip, when it comes to public universities, if your kid crosses the state line and goes to another public university, you're basically going to pay double. If you live in Georgia and you cross the state line and go to Ohio State, the Ohio State University, you're going to pay double. If you go to Penn State University and you live in New Jersey, you're going to pay double. Okay, so when it comes to publics, if you stay in state, you're going to save a lot of money. So here you got the public Washington University here, cost ballpark 35 grand for an in-state student. And then you look at a private university, I think this one was based on Gonzaga, looks like 77,000. You think, oh my gosh, there's no way we're going to afford $77,000. That's $300,000 for a bachelor's degree. That's like medical school, right? We're not going to pay that. But that's really not what you're going to pay. by the way, if you look at that cost of attendance, again, that's all in. That's tuition and fees, but it's also your dorm and your meal plan and your books and supplies and personal expenses, estimated travel, etc. Okay, so that's not all just tuition. But this family, they submit their FAFSA, they submit CIS profile, and that comes back, their student aid index is 30,000 a year. Okay. So now you have a demonstrated need of 4,500 bucks at the public and 47,000 of need at Gonzaga or this private university. Now look at the financial aid package. Okay. Public university, no merit scholarship offered, no grants offered, no work study offered. They were offered $5,500 total in a federal student loan. So they were offered student loan, basically. Okay. So that brings it down to 29, but the true cost is still 35 because that's a loan. It's not discounting it. Whereas in the private university case, they're offering this family $20,000 in a merit scholarship, excuse me, 12,600 in a grant. They're offering 4 grand in work study and 5,500 in loans. So the true cost is actually about 40 grand for this private university because they got so much in scholarships and grants. So now as a family, you can compare apples to apples. So that's how this works. Okay. So again, that's the math behind it. And you don't have to get super into the math because MyCap will do it for you. And so what you can do is use MyCap to go out and see what kind of discounts are any of these schools that we're looking at likely to give us so you can be an informed consumer. So again, if you don't have a MyCap account, make sure you open one. You can put up the 3 schools for free. Okay. So when it comes to financial aid, we always say there's a lot you can't control, but there's a lot you can control, and you want to control the controllables. So number one, know your student aid index. How much do these schools think we can afford based on our income and assets? And again, if you put your info into MyCap, it'll calculate it for you. It's going to tell you. The system will calculate it as long as you put in accurate information. Make sure you put in accurate information, of course. Okay. The second thing we always tell families is know your budget. Okay, it's shocking to me how many parents I talk to. One of the first questions I say is, "Okay, what's your budget? How much can you afford to spend?" They say, "We have no idea." I was like, "So you need to think about this as like a major purchase, a major investment, right? If you're going to buy a house, you would first start with a budget like, hey, we can afford 500 grand. And then you go shopping. You need to do the same thing with your college budget. How much can you actually afford and still retire on time, et cetera, right? How much do you have saved? How much can you pay out of pocket, et cetera? And then ideally, you want to find colleges that are in that budget. One of the biggest mistakes I see parents make, and maybe Murph, you can add to this if you want, but one of the biggest mistakes I see parents make year after year after year that I do this is they let the kid go shopping before they establish a budget. And inevitably, the kid's going to fall in love with the most expensive schools because of social media and their friends. And sometimes the high school guidance counselors push them that direction. And the parents then go, oh my gosh, we can't afford that. And then they say the most dangerous words in college financial aid planning, which is, well, if she
Yeah.
gets in, we'll figure it out because you don't
Uh,
want to crush their dreams, right?
I think that this just goes to shopping for college. You should shop for college like you shop for anything else in life. As Jason was saying, it's a really, really big investment. I think that there's obviously your budget, which is what you have in terms of resources divided up over the 4 years. And then there's also just always a mindset, right? In terms of what you think college should cost. And you really have to think through those two different numbers and plan accordingly. But we see
Yep.
it happen too much. Families
Yep.
literally shop for college backwards, and you want to avoid that because, as Jason said, come April, when all the offers are in, it's too late to do anything. It's too late to make any changes.
Yep. Which leads to this next one.
Yep.
What you can control is know what the net cost is of these colleges, the true cost, not the sticker price. Like in that last case we just showed you, you might at first glance go, we can't afford Gonzaga. Well, you actually might if you get a bunch of financial aid from them and get the cost down. So know the net cost of the 4 years and then compare it to the budget. Like I said, in an ideal world, all the colleges your kid applies to are in your budget, but you need to establish a budget first before you go shopping. But you want to shop by the net cost. Okay. Number four is submit your financial aid forms. We're going to talk more about this here in a second, but this is a big mistake we see parents make. They're like, we're not going to get any financial aid. What's the point? And then, boy, they could have gotten financial aid. They just didn't know it. They just didn't realize they left a ton of money on the table. So you're going to want to submit your financial aid forms. And honestly, I can't think of one single case why you wouldn't. And we can talk more about that. And then, if you are going to have to take out loans, and it is a reality for many families, know your best loan strategy. We do a lot of loan counseling for parents, like what are the best loans, what are the worst loans to avoid. For example, I'll tell you the Parent Plus loan. I call that that's a four-letter word. Plus is a four-letter word. It's a loan of last resort. And then know your loan strategy. Like, what's the amount I need to take out? Do I take it out all 4 years, just the first year? Do I pay off the first year with my 529 and take out loans in the last years? And then how are we going to pay them back? Is there public service loan forgiveness? Is there a cosigner release clause? You need to have a good strategy around financing. Just like if you're going to buy a house, you want to think about, do we need a 30-year mortgage? Do we need a 15-year? Do we want to be variable? All those kinds of things.
You
And the
know what?
last one, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, you know what we should add here? Don't make assumptions,
Yeah.
right? Don't assume you're gonna get money. Don't assume you're not gonna get money. Because so often we hear families say, my students top the class, they're gonna get a full ride, they're gonna get a huge scholarship, but they apply to Williams, and Williams only gives need-based aid. So just don't make assumptions. Really do your homework. I didn't mean to jump in there, but I think it
No,
both.
that's a great one.
Yeah,
Absolutely a great one. Don't assume.
yeah.
And the last thing is, and we're going to talk about this briefly here at the end of the webinar, is appeal for more money. When you go through the process, if you talk to any parents who've gone through this, you're going to apply for financial aid in the fall of the senior year. You're going to get an offer to all the places where you got admitted. You're going to get an offer for financial aid in the spring. You can appeal those offers and oftentimes get more money, which brings the cost down. It's not negotiating, but you're appealing the offer. Okay. So again, control the controllables. There's lots you can do. So now let's get to it. First of all, how do they calculate your student aid index? Remember that was number one, know your SAI. Well, they're going to look at your assets and your income. So let's talk about the assets first. There's two important things to know about how they calculate your assets. Number one, it's non-retirement assets. So if you got money in a 401k or an IRA, they're not going to look at that. So you don't have to worry about that. They're talking about things like cash in the bank, if you have taxable brokerage accounts, stuff like that. And what's really important is who owns the asset. Okay, who owns it? So if the student owns the asset, they think 20 to 25% of whatever that is should be used for college. So let's say grandma and grandpa left the kid, $100,000. I don't know, just making this up. And it's in an account with just the kid's name, like a trust with the kid's name on it, who's the owner or something. They're going to say, oh, 25 grand a year can be used for college. Whereas if it's money that a parent owns, it's assessed at 5.64%. So if it's $100,000 and the parent owns it, they're going to say 5,640 can be used for college. In other words, you lose out on a ton of financial aid, potentially need-based financial aid, if the student's the owner rather than the parent. And how they calculate, it's the current value on the day you filed the FAFSA, the day you filed the CSS profile. So if you file the FAFSA on October 15th of next year, whatever the account value is on that day is what you're supposed to report, which means you got some planning opportunities now because you want to get your SAI down as low as possible to try to qualify for need-based aid. That's something we help a lot of parents with. You want some help with that, we can help you with, asset relocation and those kinds of things. All right. Now, one of the most common assets we see when it comes to college financial aid planning is the 529 plan. That's an education savings account. You get tax deferred growth, you tax-free withdrawals if you use it for qualified education expense, all this kind of stuff. But one of the biggest mistakes we see is when parents file the FAFSA or they file the CSS profile, they list it as a student-owned asset because, well, it's kids' money, it's in their name, it's going for college. That's a big mistake because, again, it's going to be assessed at a higher percentage if it's student-owned rather than parent-owned. All right, so that's a big one. Now, the other one is grandparent-owned 529. On the FAFSA, they don't ask about grandparent-owned 529 plans. They only ask about the parent's income, or excuse me, the parent assets and the student assets, not grandparents. So there's a planning opportunity not only for you and your kid, but potentially for the grandparents. If they want to help out, help pay for college, this could work as part of a gifting strategy for estate planning. So you might want to, we're not giving financial advice tonight. We're not financial advisors or CPAs or anything, but something to think about. But who you report as the owner of the 529 plan is going to impact your financial aid. Okay. Now, what about if you own a home? Here's where it gets kind of tricky. So as I mentioned earlier, there's two different financial aid forms, the FAFSA that all colleges require, and then the CSS profile, which lots of private universities like the ones we have listed here, University of Miami in Florida, NYU, Boston College, Syracuse, these private schools use this second form also called the CSS profile. On the FAFSA, you don't have to list the home equity in your home that you live in. Now you do if you have other real estate, but not your own primary residence. But on the CSS profile, you do. And Some schools think all of the home equity in your house is basically a checking account that you could draw on to help pay for college. So these schools here, NYU, BC, Syracuse, Miami, they think that is a liquid asset to use for college. So if you own a home and you got a lot of equity in it, those schools are probably not good financial fits for your family because they are going to look at your house and go, yep, you need to take all that money out and pay us for your kid to go here. Other schools are different. Other schools don't use home equity at all. And so that's something you need to be aware of as well. Okay. All right. Now, business owners. Murph, you want to switch? I've been doing all the talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I
It's
think
the
if we
fun part.
switch it
It's the
up.
fun part.
Yeah,
But
I'll take over the Q&A.
the Q&A has been pretty quiet tonight, guys.
Oh,
Um,
need to
so
stop.
feel free to put any questions you have in the Q&A. We'll do our best to answer them. But so for business owners, it's really important to understand the rules versus for the FAFSA versus the CSS profile, and it's different. If you have a small family-owned business, fewer than 100 employees, which say a lot of family-owned businesses have fewer than 100 employees, you don't even have to include it at all, right? In terms of the valuation on the FAFSA. However, on the CSS profile, you do have to include it. And you don't just have to include a value. The way they ask for it is current market value. They ask for the current debt against the business. They also ask for certain tax line items from your business tax returns and other details that they're really trying to get a sense of it. And they might even go as far as asking for those business tax returns, not just the line items. So there's definitely a difference in terms of how it's treated, but it could also be something really strategic, knowing that, hey, if something is a business, it's excluded from the FAFSA, regardless if it's included on the CSS profile, that's a planning opportunity for several different types of things. But definitely want to understand the differences if you do own a business. And it's really important that you understand if you do own a business, CSS profile schools, things get way more complex. FAFSA schools, things should be a little bit more streamlined and your business valuation will not even go on the FAFSA. So again, family owned, smaller than 100 full-time employees. So just think small businesses. Also any commercial fisheries, farms, those are excluded as well. For farms, you do have to live on the farm. But now, there's also different treatment for divorced or separated families on the FAFSA versus the CSS profile. On the FAFSA, only one parent fills out the FAFSA, and that is going to be the parent who provides the most financial support. It used to be the custodial parent. Now, typically speaking, from a planning perspective, right, most of the folks on tonight's call, you guys have, class of 2027, 28, 29 grads. You have time to plan ahead to put the parent who is going to be more strategic for your family in that position. And again, that's just I'd say a planning opportunity, something you have to think through, right? If things are amicable, you could share information. But from a FAFSA perspective, it's just one parent's information. Whereas the CSS profile, the profile itself only asks for one parent's information, but there's often something called a non-custodial profile. And the non-custodial profile is where they're going to collect that other parent's income and asset information and then take that into account. I do also want to point out that if you're remarried, right? Let's say that you're divorced and remarried, your new spouse's information will be included on the FAFSA and on the CSS profile. If someone on tonight's call happens to be the non-custodial parent and you're remarried, that's a whole different ballgame because the institutional methodology, the formula that the CSS profile uses, they're not looking at step parent information. So for the non-custodial household. So definitely, again, just some big planning opportunities. If anyone owns a business or if anyone is divorced or separated, this process tends to be a little bit more complex, but there also tends to be opportunity to qualify for more financial aid. And that's something that we're very good at helping families identify.
Yeah. One quick point here. Again, please put your questions in the Q&A. It's difficult to reply to individual questions on the chat. They start bunching up there. So if you have put a question in the chat, please move it over to the Q&A and I'll get to it. Thank you.
So from a tax perspective, once the base year is passed, it kind of is what it is. What I mean by that is the colleges are going to look at the prior year, and that tends to be a little bit confusing in terms of the wording. So the easiest way to determine what the base year is for your family is to take your student's high school graduation year and subtract 2. So I know we have at least one senior on tonight's call. Class of 2026, the base year is 2024. Now, it isn't 24 anymore. It's the end of 25, right? So that tax year might not represent what's current. So that's something that we'll talk about on appeal, but you can't change the base year. You can't decide what tax year you're going to use or what tax year you're going to submit. It's already predetermined. And that AGI, line 11, is the biggest driving factor behind your student aid index. And that really is going to be, I'd say, the largest part of that equation. And for students, right, there's something called an income protection allowance. And the income protection allowance means that up to that dollar amount is excluded from the federal formula. And currently, class of 2026-27, it's $11,770. This is current year's number. But that $11,000 means your student can earn that and it not count against your family for financial aid. Now, if they earn above and beyond that dollar amount, it's assessed at 50 cents per dollar. So it can have a really meaningful impact to your student aid index. With the CSS profile, there is no income protection allowance. So it's a little bit different. But for the FAFSA, it's important to know that, especially if you own a business, right? You know, we work with a lot of business owners who even decide to pay their kids for various reasons, but different planning opportunities there. Now, in terms of appeals, and then after this slide, I do want to jump into the software, but in terms of appeals, it's a part of the process now. Now, it's not a part of the process that you're going to do anytime soon. You have to wait, you submit the forms, you wait for the offers, and then you appeal. But the appeals process happens usually spring of your student's senior year, and it's incredibly important. When it comes to an appeal, it's something where you're really thinking about your, I don't want to say your audience, but who you're speaking to, right? You're going to be speaking to either an admissions officer or a financial aid officer, so a person at the end of the day. They're going to want to know your details. They're going to want to know your story. They're going to want to have proof for whatever you're appealing. And the different types of appeals, right? Office of Admissions, that's always going to be your student. Office of Financial Aid, your student's going to be involved, right? But for the most part, you're going to be the person who's sharing all those different circumstances, whether it be a job loss or expenses and whatnot, with the financial aid office. So it's really important to understand who to essentially, whether it's you or your student, who to communicate with, what office, and who's going to be the person who's actually reaching out. And in terms of appeals, whether it be a change in income, whether it be expenses that aren't on your tax returns, like medical or educational expenses that aren't listed, even other circumstances like elder care, right? There's so many different reasons that are very, very valid for an appeal that just know that that's going to be part of the process. That's going to be something you have to address later on. And it doesn't hurt to make a specific ask. And what we mean by that is if you know that an extra $5,000 a year is going to make that school affordable, share it with them. If you know that you lost your job and you lost $50,000 in income and now you qualify for an extra $10,000 in need-based aid, and you need that to make it affordable to send your student to the school, let them know that. And honestly, the more detail within appeal, the better. The more documentation, the better. Just think of it as, I don't want to say like a legal argument, but think of it as you're presenting a case. The stronger the case, the better the odds at success. Now, I want to jump into the software real quick before going over this slide. So is it okay if I screen share?
Yeah, let me stop sharing.
Thank you. So I've already dropped the link to MyCAP in I think twice now. So if you haven't already saved that and put it on your computer, please do so. But so this is what it actually looks like in MyCAP. And one of the first steps going in here is you're going to be filling out your profile information. And you're going to be putting in your student's GPA, test scores, income, assets, all of those different things. Right? After you put that in, you're going to get a federal SAI and an institutional SAI. keep it simple, federal, FAFSA, institutional, CSS profile. And the range here, it's home equity, right? Some schools use it, some schools don't. Now, as Jason was saying earlier, don't try to learn all of the math behind the formula, right? The easiest thing you can do is let our software do the work. And by putting this information in, you can see the real cost, the net cost at every school in the country for your family and your specific circumstances. And we're about to talk about like what to do if you don't qualify for any need-based aid, but we're going to be talking about merit aid. And that's something that you absolutely could search for. You could search based on affordability. You could search based on, location, all different types of things. And I could click through here, but I'll stop here at affordability. It's going to be really important to have schools that are going to be under great and ideal, right? So this means that they're going to be within your family's budget. Ideal means no loans. Great means just the federal direct student loan. That's $27,000 that your student can take. And when we start looking at schools that are caution or good, just know that they're going to be over your family's budget, right? This particular budget's $164,000. They're going to be over the family budget, and that means that there's definitely going to be some borrowing. So you just want to plan properly and always have a good mix of schools and always affordable options. But is there anything you want to point out in the software that I missed, Jason?
I was answering questions. I don't know if you covered the other thing I always look at with families I work with is the salary outcomes.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a really good point as well.
you
It's
know,
important to look at it as an investment, ROI.
Yeah, if you think about college as an investment, sometimes it makes sense to pay a little more for college potentially if the salary outcomes appear to be better. But other times it doesn't. You'd be surprised. I see this a lot of times for Ivy League schools, no difference in salary outcomes than in in-state public. So you can go spend 400, you could, write a check for 400 grand to Yale, and have the same salary outcome as writing a check for 100 grand to your in-state public kind of thing. So keep an eye on that as well, I think.
100%. I think it's a really good point. Yeah. Again, shopping the right way, looking at it as an investment, but it goes in depth, right? Financial aid forms, comparing those offers for appeals, how to pay the bill, even if you do have to take loans, how to borrow. So it's very, very in depth, and it's absolutely something that if you haven't put your information in already, we've got the free version, we have the premium version. Premium means you have full access to the software and unlimited schools. Also some like additional benefits we'll talk about at the end, but if you haven't done it already, please take advantage of that.
And the other thing I'll say too is this is really a great tool for a DIY family. If you're a DIYer, you like to do all this stuff on your own, you mow your own lawn and you do the backsplash on your kitchen, walls, that kind of stuff. This is a great platform to help you DIY. If you want more one-on-one hand-holding help, we have those services as well. We'll talk about it at the end. But this is a great, great platform for those of you who are going to try to DIY this.
It's a really good point. And you know what? It's important to mention like the inputs equal the outputs. So like if you know the strategy you're going to use, and also if you put in the right numbers, not just guessing your income, it's going to make a really big difference in terms of what you're going to see for the cost projection. So please try to do this as accurately as possible.
What it
But
won't do, the limitation, to be honest, the limitation is it's not going to give you a lot of strategy, which is what we're trying to get you tonight in the webinar.
yeah,
Strategy is a really, really important part around financial planning. So this is inputs and outputs.
yeah.
But
Not
that's
going to tell you who's the custodial parent or how to value a property or anything like that, but from a
yeah, or how to relocate your assets or whatever.
yeah.
All right, am I
Okay.
sharing?
Yep, you're sharing. So what happens in a situation where your SAI is more than the cost of the school and you don't qualify for any need-based aid? Well, first off, if you don't want to spend 100 grand a year on college, you want to avoid schools that don't give any merit scholarships, don't give any any scholarships at all based on academics, right? So think about the Ivy schools like Harvard, Notre Dame, Williams, just you keep going on and on and on. They don't, no student there is getting a merit scholarship. Every student who's getting any support or any assistance from the school, it's all based on need. And if you don't qualify for any need, those schools will all be 100 grand a year. Whereas a school like Denison or Case Western or Alabama or William Ed or even schools like Boston University, they give some scholarships. USC gives some, and they're competitive schools. They give some scholarships. Northeastern gives scholarships. We could keep going on and on and on, but you want to know the schools that are actually going to give merit scholarships and discount for your student And all of that is very specific to your student too. It's specific to their GPA, their test scores, their rigor coursework, all of those things. So again, just understand that if you don't qualify for need-based aid, you don't want to spend 100 grand a year on school. You need to first know you don't qualify for need-based aid as soon as possible. So you look in the right places and you focus on merit aid. You could also focus on public schools, honors programs, things like that. Now we get this question, I don't even, a
It
handful
came
of
up, yeah.
times each week. Like we probably get this
Yeah.
question like 5 or 10 times a week at a minimum. And it's, I don't qualify for any. Why should I still do this? Right? Why am I going to take the time and bother? And it's important to understand a few different reasons. You mentioned this earlier, Jason, but there, in my opinion, there's no reason not to do this. But so a school like Santa Clara, if you don't apply for aid the first year, you're not considered for institutional aid the second, third, and fourth year. What that means is if you lose your job, right, you're potentially not going to get any assistance the second, third, and fourth year, even though your situation is very, very different than what it was the first year. And some schools like NYU, they award aid for all 4 years. And that's important to keep in mind as well. Now, of course, NYU, another big reason is because to get a merit scholarship there, which are very hard to get, but they do have them, you have to fill out your CSS profile and your FAFSA. And another specific example, we've got OU here. Mike Hinderman on our team, he's director of scholarships there. And he says they look to see not only usually if the family filed the FAFSA, but they also sometimes look to see if the student's gone in their portal and accepted the federal direct student loan. So they're looking, right? If you fill out the FAFSA and CSS profile, all you're doing is you're basically telling the schools you want money and putting yourself in a position, one, to appeal, to really fight for more money. If your circumstances change second, third, fourth year, so your student can get the federal direct student loan, even work study. There's just so many reasons to do it. The only reason not to do it is not to take the time. And I think the next slide, oh, sorry, I thought the next slide listed all those reasons, but as I said, we already covered them. Now, in terms of maximizing merit, one of the strongest strategies is applying to competing schools, right? So when it comes to think like Boston University and Northeastern, they're really competitive. To get a scholarship from those schools, don't get me wrong, it's hard, it's not easy, but when they do award those scholarships, right, it's absolutely something you can use to leverage more money from one or the other. And the Ivies, things are a little bit different. I mentioned before, they don't give merit scholarships, right? But they do meet your demonstrated need. And Yale, they use a lot of home equity, right? I believe it's 3 times your income. Whereas Columbia, they don't use any home equity. So the reason that you're applying to a competing school in the case of the Ivies isn't because of a merit scholarship, but it's because they all have different formulas. They all have different, contributing factors to your SAI. And if one doesn't use home equity and the other one does, or if one gives you a more fair offer or a lower family contribution, you can absolutely go to another Ivy and leverage that. They're very specific though about which ones they take into account. And then when it comes to the public schools too, you absolutely could use the same strategy to leverage more merit from the public schools, not need-based aid. Now for the FAFSA goes live approximately October 1st of your student senior year. Might be a few days earlier. Hopefully it's not a few days later, but October 1st of senior year. I mentioned before, but that prior year. So if you have a junior, you're in the prior year. If you have a sophomore, you're right before. You've got 3 weeks until the base year starts. And if you have a freshman, you have a little bit more time. But so there's definitely some opportunities there, but you really want to be mindful of when you're in the base year, because maybe you don't sell an investment which causes a capital gain, or you don't take that distribution from an IRA. To go on and on and on as to why. Now, again, the custodial parent, the parent who provides the most financial support, is the person who fills out the FAFSA. And to log in, create an account tonight. You go to studentaid.gov, parent account, student account, and if you don't file your taxes jointly, both parents need an account. But it's very straightforward in terms of account creation. Now for the CSS profile, this too should be live by October 1st of your student senior year. And this is not, it's not one or the other. It's not, oh, they'll take the CSS profile so they don't take the FAFSA or vice versa. It's both, right? So this is an additional financial aid requirement and somewhere around 250 colleges use this in addition to the FAFSA. The but one of the biggest differentiators for the CSS profile over the FAFSA is your primary home equity. The house you live in, the equity in that house is treated as a liquid asset. So if you have $1 million in equity in your house, right, that's $50,000 per year in terms of your family contribution to some colleges because they assess it at the same rate as they're going to assess your checking and your savings account. Now, it gets a little bit complex when it comes to home equity. When I mentioned, Yale and Columbia before, some schools use 100%, like NYU and Boston College. Some schools use 1.2 times your income, like Georgetown. Some schools use 3 times your income, like Yale. And some schools don't use home equity at all, like MIT or Harvard, right? So there's different treatment of home equity, and you really need to be mindful of that treatment. Now, for divorced or separated families, there is that non-custodial profile. So that's that additional households form, but then there's also the non-custodial waiver. And what that means is in a situation that qualifies, so usually it's going to have to do something with like maybe some sort of legal order or no contact at all or no support at all or just really proof that that parent is zero involved and not even in the picture at all. Maybe you'll get a waiver approved. The waiver is pretty difficult to get approved, so it has to be really, really good reasons, really strong reasons, usually some documentation, but it is possible. Now, for business owners, I mentioned before about how you have to enter your business information, the value, the debt, the income, right? There could be something called a business farm supplement, which is a more detailed form in addition to the questions on the CSS profile. So they get pretty in-depth tax returns. They get pretty in-depth for business owners. It's all over, just more invasive. And the reason they're asking a lot more in terms of questions and very detailed questions, sometimes a little too personal, it's not to help you. How you answer these questions is going to determine how much the school costs. And there's even some silly questions, in my opinion, at the end. Silly in the fact that they shouldn't be asking families this, but what type of car do you drive? What's the year, make, model, and debt of that vehicle, right? University of Miami, I believe Harvard asked that too. But it's why do they need to know that? They don't need to know that because if you drive a nice car, they're going to let your student into school. They want to know things like that because they're going to use that to give you less money. So again, just be very, very mindful of how you answer the CSS profile. If your students apply to CSS profile schools, usually it makes a lot of sense to reach out to us because there's a lot of money on the line there. And lastly, to log in, just your students' college board credentials, the same email address and password they use to take the PSAT, the SAT, AP exams, you name it. So I'm pretty sure we hit them all, right? SAI, college
Yeah.
budget, net costs, forms.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
We hit them all for sure. But anything you wanted to add to any of the slides that I covered?
No, it's great. I would just, emphasize to parents, like, if you're a parent of junior, sophomore, freshman, it's important to get started now because it's going to sneak up on you. And again, there's a lot of money on the line. There are a lot of things you can do. There are things you have control over. Some you don't, but a lot you do. The earlier you get started, the better, because that number one right there, know your student aid index. The lower you get that, the better. And you may need to make some financial moves before you submit the FAFSA and the CSS profile to, especially if you're going to qualify for some need-based aid at these schools. So and the other thing too is it's a long process, as you will see when you go through it next year. You're right now in the stage of building your college list and trying to figure out your budget and trying to project out net costs. And next year it's going to be filing applications, doing the forms, then it's appeals, then it's figuring out how to pay the bill. And so it's not like it used to be. It is a long, complicated process, and the sooner you get started, the better.
You know what? I want to mention that because you just mentioned paying the bill, and we're talking about loan strategy here as the second to last bullet. Loans changed, right?
Oh yeah.
So it used to be borrow whatever you want, right? And it's kind of ridiculous, but if regardless of your income, regardless of your credit score, if you wanted to borrow 100 grand a year for college, probably going to get approved for it through the Parent Plus loan program. That's not happening anymore. Um, the limit is going to be $20,000 per year or $65,000 for the lifetime of a student. And that's going to really change how families, I think, should look at this and should have conversations around affordability because they're setting loan limits, federally speaking. And that historically has been the easiest loan to qualify for. So
Yeah,
plan now, plan how you're going to pay. If you don't have enough savings for college and you want to increase your college budget, you need a financial plan to make sure that you're on track to do so. Um, Making
yeah.
sure you're looking at the right schools from an affordability perspective. Can't stress that enough. The schools your student looks at is really going to determine a lot about how much college costs. But
Especially if your kid's going to go beyond just a bachelor's degree. So if you got a kid that wants to go to medical school or law school or grad school or MBA or whatever, it's a different it's a different environment now because the big beautiful bill capped the amount of loans you can take out at those levels, which then is going to bleed back into how much you can afford for undergrad. Because if you got 400 grand for med school, but you can only take out $200,000 in loan, you got a $200,000 gap. Well, if you've spent that much on the undergrad, you don't have it available. Who's going to? It gets really messy. So if you do have a kid who wants to go on and be a doctor or something like that, you need to plan for all of that as part of your undergrad college planning process. Because again, as Murph said, they've put caps on how much loans you can take out at those levels, and so you need a plan. You just don't want to wing this. It's high stakes. It's our kids, and it's a lot of money.
is it okay before we get too close to the end if I explain kind of what next steps are for everyone?
Yeah, let me stop sharing.
We've got this saying, everyone: action absorbs anxiety, and
Yes.
I think it's a really good saying. I didn't hear it before. I think Peg was the first person to share it with me, but it's really true and it's a really good saying. Like this whole process is so stressful, and we work with a lot of families one on one, and we see it, right? We see how stressed they are in the beginning versus where they're at now. And I think the first thing you can do is take action. And we're offering a few different things. So first off, you can schedule a free meeting with us, right? So we'll be able to determine, are you eligible for financial aid? Are you only eligible for merit scholarships? And really just figure out, is there anything you can be doing to get more money? And if there are things that you can be doing to get more money, we will explain what next steps look like and make sure that you just have a full understanding of kind of what that path forward is. Now, for it to be free, two things. One, you have to book by midnight tonight. And two, for a few different reasons, we're also closed for a couple weeks around the holidays, but you'll have to meet with us by Saturday the 20th. Right. So it is something where you can meet with us in the new year or anything else. You have to book tonight and meet with us by the 20th. Now, if all of this sounds like a lot and we understand it is, and you want some more comprehensive help, we are there, right? We do work one on one with families from a financial aid perspective, from an admissions perspective, and both. And that's something that if you have questions on, you can hop on a call with us and ask them. Or if you wanted to learn more, you can also click through. You know what? Actually, I don't think I've shared this yet. I want to share this page in the chat. But so I just dropped that in the chat. But now we totally get it. There are some families who just they do their own taxes. They would never hire help, and they really are DIYers. And we love that. I think probably half or more of our team are the DIY type. And we want to support you in that way as well. So if you're a DIYer and you don't want outside help, at least at a minimum, we would suggest starting off with premium MyCAP. You'll be able to put in unlimited schools, you'll get the members benefits. You'll also have access to things like private scholarships and office hours and a presentation. So it's really, really helpful. Jason mentioned before, MyCAP Premium, the software does not include kind of that strategy or that one-on-one guidance, right? It's truly the DIY approach. But for some folks, that's the right approach. And if you're not sure, hop on a call with us and we'll help you figure that out. We
Yeah.
try to be, very good at determining what's the best approach, who can save a lot of money, who, if they didn't already know that they should DIY it, who should DIY it. So again, feel free to ask us if you don't know. And I think we had this come up at least 2 or 3 times, but we don't share the slides. right? You won't get a copy of the slides tomorrow, but you will see the recording of tonight's presentation at some point tomorrow. Usually around tomorrow morning, but maybe even earlier than that. Depends on our wonderful Eileen. But so, anyways, I will. Jason, do you want to add anything here?
I'll just add, I got a couple of questions about what's included, that kind of thing. If you take advantage of this free consultation, 15 minutes talk with us, we'll give you an honest assessment of of your situations, maybe suggest some next steps, maybe ask you some questions you haven't thought about, that'll get you some clarity and that kind of thing. And so, it's very helpful for parents because having gone through this myself as a parent, I know having talked to thousands of parents, it's very, very stressful. It's extremely stressful. It's confusing and people are busy and working and you got the holidays coming up and so forth. So a lot of times, just talking to us will give you some relief, some stress relief. And if you feel like you're in good shape, we'll tell you, like, yeah, you're good, keep going. You're doing the right things. And if not, we'll be like, hey, you might want to think about this instead. So some expert guidance is incredibly helpful. So I encourage you, take advantage of that free consultation.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we have a lot of calls where families are surprised in a good way, and they're glad to learn ahead of time that they're looking at the process either the right way or the wrong way.
Right.
A lot of calls. My student can borrow. My student can take loans, right? No. Or my student loves Penn State and University of Maryland, and we're gonna get a lot of money from them, right?
Yeah.
No. Right? They're gonna be 60 grand a year. So those are things that we're just really good at pointing out. But again, the link is in the chat, and also in addition to that, the link to the landing page is also in the chat. So if you want to learn how to DIY, if you want to learn about how we work one-on-one with families, you could absolutely dive into that as well. But here, I'll stop sharing my screen now. We had a couple of questions about grad school. We do have folks on our team. I think it's fair to say Jason and myself, we're more so on the undergrad side, but we can definitely help you plan for that. But we also have some folks on our team who really specialize in that grad school aspect. So yeah, you absolutely could meet with us and we could figure out exactly what makes sense for your family. Uh, but
Yeah, and it's optional if you want your student to attend or not. Most of the times we work with parents, or at least on this initial consultation, because we're focused on the financial side of things, and parents are usually the ones paying. So we want to have
yeah,
an honest conversation with the parents, like, look at your financials. What does it look like? Now, if you we end up working with you, the student will be involved for sure. But usually that initial consult, it's optional. But we're going to be talking about financial stuff, so I don't know if you want your kid there for that.
that's like if you have your student there, be prepared to talk about your finances in front of them. So that would be one thing I would say. And another thing too, whether it's the free version or the premium version, we really, really ask families to have a MyCAP account completed, best of your ability. Because without that, we don't know if you're eligible for any need-based aid. We don't know what your income is. We don't, and our calls are 15 minutes, so we want to make the most of that time. Usually, we spend time before the meeting looking through your account. So please try to have your MyCap account created ahead of time.
Yeah, for sure. That's super helpful.
But alrighty, we're right about time here.
Yeah.
I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation. I hope that this was very, very insightful for you. And obviously, we're in the holiday season, so we wish everyone happy holidays and hope to see you all on 15-minute calls.
Yeah, as I said earlier, action absorbs anxiety. This is
Yeah,
very true, especially when it comes to college planning. Parents of juniors, this is going to sneak up on you. So you need to get started right away. The earlier you get started, the better. It's going to give yourself more opportunities for planning and more things you can do to get the cost down. And it's going to lower your stress level for sure. Because if you kick the can down the road and wait till next year, you'll regret it. All the parents we talk to of seniors are like, I wish I had started this last year. That was a huge mistake.
literally, everyone says that who comes to
Everybody.
us in senior, every single person. Yeah,
Every single person.
yeah.
I wish I had started
I,
this 2 years ago.
I wish we could record the
I
families
know.
because I think everyone would appreciate seeing that like what we're telling is the truth. Like the earlier you start, if you have a freshman, you're like, I don't want to talk about this now, it's too early. Trust me when I say you'll be really happy that you do and you do start planning, even if you have a sophomore. Junior, like you don't have time to delay. If you have a student who's currently a junior, you need to
Yeah.
be kind of
Yeah,
fully in this at this point in the process.
absolutely.
But
In
anyways,
part because that junior's probably already starting to look at colleges. And
yeah.
I guarantee you they're looking at the expensive ones.
And touring colleges is not cheap. And
And
taking time off
touring
work,
guys.
yeah, like it's not cheap. And all of a sudden you're gonna go tour a bunch of schools and they're all gonna be way too expensive. And now you've wasted a few weekends and a few $1,000s on tours. And it's like try to avoid those situations, please. But
Yeah.
anyways,
Thanks, everybody. Hopefully that was helpful. Book that 50-minute consult and talk with us. You'll be glad you did.
all right, everyone. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye.